Hey guys, Cliff Gray here with Flat Tops Wilderness Guides and True Hunts. Today I'm going to go over the use of ropes on mountain hunts, and I'm not going to cover rappelling, but I'm going to cover the more applicable scenarios where you're either dropping game or gear or lifting game up. All right. Generally, my view on using ropes during hunts, it's not you're not going to use them to get into somewhere. You're generally going to use them to get out of somewhere that would otherwise be dangerous. And then, of course, whenever you harvest a mountain animal, particularly mountain goats and those sort of species, you never know where they're going to end up. So you just got to kind of deal with the situation. All right. The thing that I'll mention that's related to that is that generally it's a lot easier to get around in this really rugged terrain when you're going up and when you're light in terms of your pack. And when it's more difficult and dangerous is when you're going downhill and your pack's heavier. So the scenario that you'll run into a lot with hunting is that you go up lighter, and then also when you're going uphill, it's a lot easier to scramble through rocks and rough terrain. And then you get into an area, you harvest an animal, and now you've got to go downhill, which by itself is a more difficult situation just because gravity's not on your side as much. It's just a little harder to keep your balance. And then the other part is now you've got a heavy pack, and that just exacerbates the issues of going downhill, okay? So without, a little rope technique, you might find yourself in a very dangerous situation. So this video is meant to show you a couple techniques that can help you in those scenarios. All right, guys, before I show you what I call the Manny knot for just tightening up gear before you're actually going to rope it down gear or quarters or a cape or whatever, first I'm going to real briefly show you the climbing gear that I would take on a trip where I might need it. So here's that. All right, guys, so I'm going to go over equipment real quick when it comes to ropes on mountain hunts, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this really minimal, and you'll see in the hands-on part of this video that I try to show you a very gear minimalistic approach, and that's because that's a lot more practical for mountain hunts, okay? If we're just talking about dropping gear, hoisting up gear, gear, harvested animal, capes, or whatever, those sort of scenarios where a person is not on the equipment, in those situations, it's even easier to be very minimalist about it. So I'll show you all this gear in that context, okay? So first, you need a static rope. This is a Beal rope, and you'll see that I have it marked with tape in the middle, okay? So the reason that I do that is I want to know where the middle of the length is. It's important for rappelling when you have a human humans rappelling on it, but it's also important when you're just hoisting and dropping gear to know where the middle of your rope is. In some scenarios, you're going to have the rope doubled over, okay? The other thing is it's just nice to know as an indication of where you're at on the rope, okay? All right, so that's a Beal rope. This is a 8mm rope. If you look at the metrics, you'll be amazed what can be held on a static 8mm rope, okay? So static ropes, that's ideal for moving gear, dropping gear, rappelling on, okay? That's not a rope you'd climb on, or use as support where you're going to fall on it, okay? All right, for that scenario, you'd want a dynamic rope. For the context of mountain hunting, almost everybody is going to want a static rope, okay? I don't see really any scenario where you'd want a dynamic rope for this application, okay? All right, so the next thing that you're going to have after your static rope is you're going to have some anchoring material, okay? All right, so I like cordelette and then slings, okay? And I tie my slings and then basically daisy chain them on carabiners, different lengths, so they're kind of ready, all right? So almost all your scenarios where you're tying to trees, that's going to be the most often case when you're setting up an anchor in a mountain hunting scenario. You can use slings or you can use cordelette. In a situation where you've got like massive boulders, cordelette's good to have, okay? And it's safe to anchor it, but you need a big loop, okay? So cordelette's nice for that. Those two options, slings and cordelette, they cover almost everything almost every scenario of anchoring, you're going to be good to go on that. If you want to choose one or the other because you just want to be light and compact, to me, cordelette's better. All right? All right, and then the next thing you're going to need, and the last thing you actually need, is you need some sort of mechanics, particularly for hoisting, to basically capture the amount of gain you're getting on your pulley mechanism. So I use auto blocks for that. All right, okay. They're basically just small little ropes. They're called auto blocks. You can buy them. You'll see in the hands-on version of the video of how I use them. Okay, so that's all you need right there, right? For to get scenarios done where you need to hoist and drop gear. Okay, and you could actually get rid of these slings, and you could carry just this. Okay, the one thing I have on here that you don't necessarily have to have, but it's pretty nice to have when you're talking about anchors, is I have rappelling rings on here. Okay, outside of the context of this video, if you're going to do any rappelling and you're going to go get the proper training and be safe about it, then wrap rings are very nice in the mountains. Generally, for better or worse, if you end up rappelling on a mountain hunt, the anchor and the wrap ring is going to stay up there. All right, so it's nice to have wrap rings, so you're not leaving, $7 or $8 carabiners up on your anchor. Okay, so you can have a couple wrap rings, and that actually brings up a point. You're going to need, for dropping gear, hoisting gear, you need to have 4 or 5 carabiners. You might as well just have locking ones. Okay. They're not that much more expensive than otherwise, and they have a lot more application, a little bit safer setup. If you want to have some carabiners that are just for holding gear, you can use these non-locking versions. All right, and you can get away if you want to just be super light and you want to save a couple dollars for whatever reason. It doesn't make on any of this stuff. It doesn't make a lot of sense to save $2 or $3 on something, but if you want to, you can just buy a few more of the non-locking type and you can double them up. Surely not on human use, on human rappelling and stuff like that. You don't want to do that. But when you're lifting gear and dropping gear, you can get away with just simple non-locking carabiners, okay? It's still not the safest, but that's a choice that you're going to have to make. It's not my choice to make for you. If it was up to me, you might as well just get a bunch of locking carabiners, okay? All right, so that's the bare bones minimum. The one thing that you might find some use for is one of these little pulley devices. Okay, they're gonna make the setup of pulley mechanisms a lot quicker. I mean, if you have a pulley, it's pretty self-explanatory how you're gonna use it. This is a micro traction Petzl. They're expensive. They're like $100 if I recall correctly. But it's pretty nice to have, okay? Like, it's not something you need for mountain hunts, but it's a nice to have item that'll save you some time, a little bit easier to work with. All right, guys, if you're wanting to get into like the next step, do a little rappelling, or you just want the ultimate convenience of stuff, cover all your bases, there's a couple more items you might consider buying. This is just your basic belay device, okay? And this can be nice for if you're working a pulley system for hoisting gear or dropping gear. It is nice to have a belay device. Not a have to have, but it is nice to have. And then you can get a nice lightweight harness, okay? This is a camp harness. I like this harness because it packs really tight and it's lightweight. This is their Alpine Flash harness, okay? So that pretty much covers it, guys. All this other shit on here you're not going to need for mountain applications or want, okay? So those two items, basically the belay device, the micro traction, and then the harness. There are scenarios where those would be nice to have. All right, guys, so I'm going to show you what I call a Manny knot real quick. And this is a little paracord. You could use a cordelette or whatever to do this also, but paracord's probably your best bet, or 550 cord, a lot of folks call it. It's going to be your best kind of weight/bulk trade-off for strength for something like this. So what you're going to find is when you're dropping gear, what you don't want to do is a lot of guys, so let's just imagine this is a quarter. You can probably tell from the shape it's not, but use your imagination. A lot of guys, what they want to do when they drop gears, they want to tie it, or like a quarter, they want to tie it at the top like this, or even a pack. They'll tie it from like a Holland strap on the top. The problem with that is as you drop it, you're kind of dragging an anchor, okay? So what I like to do is what I call is a Manny type of knot. So get your length of paracord out. What I'll do is I'll put a bowline in the top just to make a little loop. Okay, and so I'll go on the top of the gear and then here through the loop. And you need a lot more cord than you think on this. I'll cut it here in a second, but you're gonna need, you know, probably 6 or 7 times the length of the actual item. Okay, so I'll get that. And then with loose gear, stuff that's got straps, you can capture straps underneath this cord. You're just gonna tighten it like that, and then take a bite of the rope like this, go under that, and through, basically like a slip knot on a bite, and then tighten it like that. So you've got a loop here, just do a 1/2 inch over that, okay? And then what you're gonna do is just 1/2 inch down the item, okay? And it varies how many loops you want to do. And to me, it varies just kind of how much of a mess the gear is, right? Like a mountain goat cape or something like that, you're gonna want to do a bunch just because it's squishy and it's got no shape in its own right. So you might end up doing a bunch of these loops just to keep it under control, okay? So you're just gonna work your way down the item, and then you can flip it over, taking your working end here and go over the top. All right, so once you're on the back side of the pack, you're gonna wanna grab all your line and you're gonna go under these loops. And you can see here, in an attempt to kind of keep my line and not cut it, I've got it all wadded up so I can go through all at once. It can be a bit of a pain in the ass because what you're doing is you gotta run the whole line. Sometimes I'll skip one, sometimes I'll do each one. Again, that's just related to how much of a mess the gear is, okay? So I'm going under it, then around, okay, there. And then you always want to go under the last one and the first one, okay? So here I've gone through and then here I've gone through. Okay, so you're keeping it tight the whole time, and then over this end here, and then you can come back to where your original loop is here. And then what I do is I take a bite of the rope, go over this side, okay, like that. Then I take the same bite, go over the other side, and then I go through where the bite came across, okay? So then I'll tighten that up, and then I can put 2 1/2 inches on this. And that just makes a nice tidy set of gear for you. Anyway, so that's what I call the Manny knot. And that's the best thing to do to get your gear prepped before you drop it or pull it up in the mountains. All right, guys, so I showed you the Manny knot on the little smaller gear load. Here I've got it on a little bit bigger gear so I can show you some things a little easier. And so I'm gonna show you how to tie in a Manny'd load into a static rope for dropping the gear or lifting it up out of somewhere, okay? So the easiest way to do this is you can just take a locking carabiner and you can just go into the Manny line like that, and then you can take your line, your rope, and I like to use knots that I can tie mid-rope, okay? So I like the Alpine butterfly knot. Put it across your palm, 1, 2 wraps, okay? So you got 3 strands over your hand. Take the top one, put it under the middle one, take what was your middle one and go around both the now lower strands, okay? And this knot takes a little finesse to get it to tighten up. But just kind of work it down, and you'll know you have it right because it's a real pretty knot actually. And so the advantage of this knot is it's got 2 bites on it, right here and here, okay? So it centers the loop, but it also makes it so that knot's pretty darn easy to get out, all right? Those bites make it so it doesn't matter how much tension you have on there, you can still push these through typically and get it loosened up, all right? So you could take like an Alpine butterfly on your rope and put it in your locking carabiner, all right? And you could just drop gear like that or haul gear up like that. the disadvantage of this is that you can see right there, when I pick it up, a lot of the weight goes away from your rope and you don't have a whole lot of control over the pack, right? So if you got, it's a, it's a mountain goat cape and the quarters are wrapped inside the cape, so it's a pretty significant load. That bottom's gonna swing, and that's gonna be like an anchor, all right? And it can get stuck in stuff, and it's just a little bit harder to maneuver. So what I find is, again, it's back to having the loop in the middle. What I find is I like to have this end of my rope, the downhill end. My hope is that I can get it down to my hunting partner or somebody who's with me, and they can have the end of the rope. And how that works out typically is we've got all the gear and all the heavy stuff up here, and because they don't have to deal with all that gear, they can maneuver however we came up the mountain, right? And they can do so safely because that extra weight is not affecting their balance and making the situation dangerous for them. So they'll go down there, they get down where we want to drop the gear. I'll take the end of my rope and get the end of my rope to them. And with a heavy load, it's really nice to have that security for them to have it, because you might know the path you came up and the path that you're thinking about going down yourself, but you don't really know what the path is that the gear is going to take as you drop it. So that could be, it could get stuck in trees, it could get stuck in little cracks. But the key thing you got to watch for is it could stop on a rim, and you can think that the gear's going down. It could be out of sight or something, and you think it's going down, but it's actually just sitting on a rim, and then all of a sudden it breaks loose and it hits you real hard. Okay, and that can be dangerous, if not deadly, depending on how you're dropping the gear, and we'll go into different variations of that. But if you have a partner at the end of the rope, they can help you with that, because they can keep tension on it all the time, so you can feel that tension and you kind of know where the pack is while you drop it the whole time. All right, so of course you can do that style of dropping just with the one point of attachment, but the ideal situation actually is to have the locking carabiner attachment into the alpine butterfly loop. But then also, this you're going to have the end of your ropes for. Go and thread the rope through your Manny line, let's say. Okay, so that end going down to your buddy, hopefully, or at least try to get it where the rope's clear down to the bottom and you know where it's at. So that's there. And then take the other side of your rope, and what you're going to want to do is work it through your Manny also. Okay, now I've got like 100 foot of rope here, so I'm not gonna put you through the misery of watching me pull a thread 100 foot of rope through here. But that's the idea, okay? So now the line is through the locking carabiner and the alpine loop, but it's also through the Manny in multiple different spots. And now what you're gonna see is that when you're dropping the gear, even from the top, now that you've got this rope, when you pull on it and stuff, you're moving it like this, okay? And if you got somebody down there to help you, you can actually kind of pick it up, and you're picking it up long ways. You don't have this situation as much, and so it's a lot more likely to stay upright like this and get through the terrain a lot safer and easier without hanging up. All right, so that's the preferred method. It's for sure a little more of a pain in the ass than just the one point of locking in, but it'll save you a lot of hassle.